The fluorescent lights flickered in the break room of the small grocery store, casting a sterile glow over the chipped linoleum floor and the sagging table, where a young cashier sat, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. Daniel Harper, disguised in a worn flannel shirt and a name tag that read Dave, froze in the doorway, his heart lurching at the sight. He was no stranger to the hum of the storage shelves stocked with dreams and struggles. It's always a quiet stage for human stories, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered pain, and it pierced through the carefully constructed facade of his undercover mission. As the CEO of Harper's Markets, he had come to this struggling location in a small Ohio town to uncover why it was failing, to observe the employees and customers without the weight of his title. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The girl, barely in her 20s, hadn't noticed him yet, her muffled cries echoing in the cramped space, each one a silent plea that tugged at something deep within him. What had broken her? What weight could be so heavy that it spilled out? Here, in this forgotten corner of a store fighting to stay afloat, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of human connection, please hit the like button, drop a comment, share this story, and subscribe to Expose the Earth to join us in uncovering stories that matter. Daniel had built Harper's Markets from a single corner store into a regional chain, but success had come at a cost. He was 47, gray creeping into his temples, and the weight of years spent in boardrooms and balance sheets had left him disconnected from the heartbeat of his own company. The Ohio store, one of the oldest in the chain, was bleeding money, and the corporate team had suggested closing it. But Daniel refused to make that call from a glass tower in Chicago. He needed to see it, feel it, understand why a store that had once been the pride of the small town was now a ghost of itself. So, he traded his tailored suits for jeans, his corner office for a name tag, and slipped into the role of Dave, a new stock clerk. For 2 weeks, he stacked shelves, mopped floors, and watched. He saw employees who moved like automatons, customers who barely made eye contact, and a manager who seemed more interested in his phone than the store's pulse. But it was Lily, the cashier with the tear-streaked face, who stopped him cold that afternoon. Her name tag was crooked, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes, when she finally looked up, were red-rimmed but fierce, like she was fighting a battle she wasn't sure she could win. Lily's story, though Daniel didn't know it yet, was woven into the fabric of the town itself. She had grown up in the shadow of the steel mill that had once been the lifeblood of this community, until it shuttered a decade ago, leaving families like her scrambling. Her father, a mill worker, had spiraled into addiction, and her mother, a nurse, worked double shifts to keep the lights on. Lily, at 22, was the glue holding her fractured family together. She had dreams: once college, a degree in social work, a chance to help kids like her younger brother, who was slipping into the same darkness that had claimed their father. But life had other plans. Her mother's health was failing, her brother was getting into trouble, and the bills piled up like a cruel game of Jenga, each one threatening to topple everything. The cashier job at Harper's was her lifeline, but it barely paid enough to cover rent, let alone the medical bills or the groceries she snuck home to keep her brother fed. The day in the break room, the weight of it all had finally broken her, and she had slipped away during her break to let the tears come, hoping no one would see. Daniel, as Dave, hesitated. His instinct was to walk away. CEOs didn't get involved in personal dramas. They analyzed data, made decisions, moved on. But something about Lily's vulnerability, the way her hands shook as she wiped her face, anchored him to the spot. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him, and cleared his throat. Lily startled, her eyes darting to him, a mix of embarrassment and defiance flashing across her face. She mumbled an apology, something about allergies. But Daniel saw through it. He sat across from her, his own heart pounding, and asked gently if she was okay. The question was simple, but it unraveled her. Lily's words came haltingly at first, then in a rush. A torrent of pain and fear that shattered the sterile air of the break room. She told him about her mother's illness, her brother's struggles, the landlord's threats, and the crushing guilt of not being enough. "I'm trying so hard," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But it's never enough. I'm failing them. Dave. I'm failing everyone." Those words hit Daniel like a freight train, cracking open a part of him he'd long buried, the part that remembered his own mother working 3 jobs to keep him fed. The part that knew what it was to feel like you were drowning in a world that didn't care. For the next few days, Daniel couldn't shake Lily's words. As he stocked shelves and rang up customers, he watched her. She was diligent, kind even under pressure, flashing smiles at cranky customers and helping an elderly woman carry bags to her car. But he saw the strain in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. He started noticing others. To the single mother who worked the deli counter, the stock boy who limped from an old injury, the manager who hid his own exhaustion behind a brusque demeanor. This store wasn't just failing because of numbers. It was failing because the people who kept it running were breaking under the weight of their lives. Daniel began to see the store not as a line item on a spreadsheet, but as a microcosm of the town, a place where people clung to hope despite everything. He started small, as Dave, slipping extra hours onto Lily's schedule, covering shifts so she could leave early for her mother's appointments. But he knew it wasn't enough. The store needed more than Band-Aid fixes, and so did Lily. The turning point came late one night. After closing, Daniel stayed behind, pretending to organize inventory. But really, he was wrestling with a decision. The corporate plan was to cut costs, lay off staff, reduce hours, maybe close the store altogether. But as he walked the empty aisles, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, he saw Lily's face, heard her voice, felt the weight of her struggle. He thought of his own mother, who had died too young, worn out by a world that demanded too much. He couldn't let this store, this town, these people become another casualty of profit margins. So, he made a choice. The next morning, he called a meeting with the regional manager, still as Dave, and suggested a radical idea. Invest in the employees, raise wages, offer health benefits, create a fund for emergencies. The manager scoffed, citing budgets and bottom lines, but Daniel pressed, his voice steady with a conviction he hadn't felt in years. He proposed a pilot program, a test to see if supporting the staff could turn the store around. Reluctantly, the manager agreed, unaware that he was speaking to the man who could make it happen. Over the next month, changes rippled through the store. Wages went up, not dramatically, but enough to ease the strain. A small emergency fund was established, and Lily was the first to receive help, a grant to cover her mother's medical bills. Training programs were introduced, giving employees like the stock boy a chance to learn new skills. Daniel, still undercover, watched as the store began to breathe again. Customers noticed the difference. Employees smiled more. The shelves were better stocked. The air felt lighter. Lily, though still burdened, started to carry herself with a quiet strength. She didn't cry in the break room anymore. One day, she pulled Daniel aside, thinking he was just Dave, and thanked him for covering her shifts. "You don't know what it's meant," she said, her eyes bright with something close to hope. Daniel nodded, his throat tight, unable to tell her the truth. Not yet. The day he revealed his identity was one the store would never forget. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day where the town seemed to hold its breath. Daniel gathered the staff in the break room, his flannel shirt replaced by a crisp suit, his name tag gone. The employees stared, confused, as he introduced himself as Daniel Harper, CEO of Harper's Markets. Gasps filled the room, followed by stunned silence. He told them why he'd come, what he'd seen, and how they'd inspired him to fight for this store. He announced that the Ohio location would not only stay open, but become a model for others. a place where employees were valued, where community mattered more than profit. Lily stood at the back, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. Daniel met her gaze and felt his own eyes burn. He had come to save a store, but in the end, it was Lily, this town, and these people who had saved him, reminding him why he'd started this company in the first place. As the weeks turned into months, the store thrived. Lily enrolled in night classes, chasing her dream of becoming a social worker. Her brother started counseling, and her mother's health stabilized. The town began to rally around the store. Drawn by its renewed spirit, Daniel returned to Chicago. But he was different now, less a CEO and more a man who understood that numbers were nothing without the people behind them. He carried Lily's story with him, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, changing lives in ways no spreadsheet could measure.